Hello, my name is Carol Higgins, and I'm here to talk about my story about how my father raped me as a child. I grew up on a council estate in Denby Dale in a house of extreme violence with my two siblings, Donna and Paul. I was a caring child to my sister because she had grand mal epileptic seizures. She had a disability. Donna took her life when she was 32 years old. I was 31. So from as far back as I can remember, my dad's beat me with a leather belt. He used to have two thick black leather belts. My mum used to beat me with a slipper and with a wooden spoon. And my dad used to go out drinking every night to the pub. So he'd come in arguing with my mum. There'd be a lot of violence. He'd be always jealous and accusing her of going off with other men. When I got to about 12-year-old, my dad, the physical violence wasn't as bad, but then he started kissing me properly, like a boyfriend-girlfriend kissing. He took me out for these long walks looking for scrap metal one day, and he took his gun out and shot the dog in front of me. Then he told me to turn away, and then he sat me down on the pipe, and that's when he started kissing me for the first time properly. I was confused. I didn't know what to feel or what to think. I'd just seen my dog being shot. I told my mum after a few months about him kissing me properly on the front doorstep of our house, and then I told her not to tell him because I was frightened of my dad. Two social workers came to school and asked me to stay behind and speak to them in the staff room. And then when I went back home, my mum said she was leaving my dad. We went and stayed in a stranger's house. We got kicked out of that house after a few months. And my dad got in contact with me, and I met him on Barnsley Market. My mum had got a newfound freedom, so she was going out all the time and leaving me on my own with the strange people in the lodgings houses. He was being like a normal dad, and I wasn't seeing my mum. And then I said to my mum, I want to go and live back with my dad. So when I went back to live with my dad, everything seemed quite normal for a few weeks. And then Donna, she went to live with my mum. So there was me and Paul living with my dad then. And then a social worker, the social worker that came to school, Mr. Sykes, and who would come to our house when we were growing up, came to the house and said to me, you've been to live with your mum and now you've come back to live with your dad. It's obvious you can't make your mind up who you want to live with. So if you change your mind, you will get put into a children's home. And my sister Donna was in a children's home. I'd seen she'd been put in a children's home because my mum and dad couldn't cope with her disability. So when the social worker said that to me, at that point, I had nowhere to go. It was stay with my dad and going to the children's home. So at that point, I took a knife out the drawer and I slashed my wrist. And my dad come back round, got off the phone, come back round to the house and told me that he didn't think it was too bad to go to hospital, but I was too mentally unstable to go to sleep in my own bed. So I had to sleep with him. And then I felt this tickling on my tummy and his hand go down in between my legs, and then open my legs, reach and get a condom out of his drawer and have sex with me. And then when he was still on top of me, I said to him, what would my granddad say if he knew what you'd just done? And he says, don't worry, sweetheart, I believe same as me, that fathers should break the daughters in like Native American Indians do. And so from that moment on, I believe that what he was doing to me was normal. And he put my mum's engagement ring on my finger, and then he put a tattoo on my back with his name on it and my name. It went on for about a year and a half, where nearly every day, where he'd come in from the pub and he'd take me quietly into his bedroom because Paul would be in the next bedroom and he would have sex with me. He would keep me off school to do all the housework and cook his meals. I was like his wife. I knew I couldn't run away, so I stood it for as long as I could until I was about nearly 16, 15 and a half. And I got on the bus and went to my mum's house. My mum wanted me to go to the police and tell them, and I wouldn't because I felt like I was to blame, that I'd asked for it. So I didn't go for about a week, and then a week later I did go to the police and I gave a 17-page statement. The police officer who took my statement said to me, if this goes to court, your name will be dragged through the mud and blackened, and you'll be made out to be the biggest liar and slag going. Can you handle it? And I told him that I couldn't handle it. So they said that they're not going to press charges, there's not enough evidence. And then my mum kicked me out at 16, and I ended up living in a cold rented house in a rough area in Barnsley on my own. I got a job on a sewing factory and a YTS scheme. And then I started going to Rape Crisis. That's a charity for victims of rape. I met my husband when I was 17 and he was 19. And then we struggled in our relationship. We got married and had 2 children, and we was together 15 years. And then in 2005, I went to the police again and reported it for the second time. And they told me that they'd lost my original 17-page statements from 1984. They wouldn't let me make another statement. When I was a mother to my children, I used to shout at them and smack my son especially, who was very challenging. And I went to the doctors and said, look, I can't control my son. She suggested that I go on a Webster Strachan parenting course, and that was the best thing that happened to me, that she taught me about time out and how to chastise my children without using violence, because that's all I'd known from me being a child. My dad was living in Denbydale, still in the house where I grew up. I started going to church at that time, and I got this feeling inside that I needed to go to my dad's and tell him that I forgive him, to try and release the chains that felt like there was wrapped around me, you know, with the trauma. And he started telling me about him and my mum arguing, and I says, I know about you and my mum arguing, remember I was there. I says, but what you did to me, I was a child and you was an adult. I thought you might be at least sorry for what you've done. And he just looked up inaudibly and went, I'm sorry. He hugged me and he kissed me on my shoulder here, like big wet lips like he always had, his mouth open. And he kissed me, and I thought to myself, you aren't sorry. I went to the police again to report what he'd done to me. When they said that they couldn't take it to court because my statements had been lost, he said to me, your statements haven't been lost, they've been burnt along with everybody else's from the 1980s. Plus, someone else had seen a letter at the side of my statement saying, these statements need to be destroyed because they're an embarrassment to the family. But I didn't know in all this time that my dad was a police informer. So my dad wasn't just sexually abusing me, he was sexually abusing his niece, Tony. And then he also used to rape other children on the street. When I was trying to get them to take statements from me, again, because I'd lost my original statement, said that they'd phoned my mum and her brother to get an account off them, but they wouldn't take a statement from them either. And in 2014, I had bowel cancer. So I went to the police, and about 4 months after me having surgery, and then she said, we're not taking your case forward because he's already been arrested in 1984 and it would be an abusive process. So they closed the door on me again. So then, I wrote my book in 2000, after doing my climb in 2014, Climb Up Kilimanjaro. I said to my friend who were helping me proofread it, I says to him, I'm going to name my dad in this book. Witnesses started coming forward then from reading my book. In 2015, they finally took a statement from me. At this time, my dad had reported me to the police for harassment, saying that I was harassing him. And the police were gathering evidence against me for harassing him. And it had gone to CPS, but yet I couldn't get my case to CPS. So then in 2017, the CPS made a decision not to charge my dad. So I did my right to review. And finally, in 2018, they invited me into the police station and said to me, we've overturned the decision. I says, I knew it. I knew you wouldn't. They went, no, did you hear me? We've overturned the decision. It's going to court. We've put 15 charges on the indictment. They swore the jury in. There were 12 members, and the judge had said that with the jury, it was all or nothing. All the jurors had got to say were guilty. And then my mum got brought up as a witness, and she admitted that he'd said to her when I was a child that he believed all fathers should break the daughters in. Took me 35 years to get justice, but it only took him an hour and a half. Then the judge did the summing up and said that he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Can you see how I feel about him getting found guilty? Because now I knew I'd got him off the streets from raping other children as well. Since my dad's got sent down, I've gone after West Yorkshire Police, who failed me for 35 years. And the police have come back and said they've got no lessons to learn from the 35 years of serious systematic failings to investigate him. I sent off through Freedom of Information, subject access forms. It's come back and it's nearly all redacted. And it shouldn't all be redacted, so they're blanking everything out that proves to me that they've covered up and protected my dad for all these years. And the reason I think they're doing that is because they're all blackmailing each other, because my dad part of an establishment paedophile ring. And the reason incest wasn't on the indictment, I asked my barrister why it wasn't, and he says it's because it carries a lesser charge than rape. And I went, how can that be? And he says because incest implies that the child is complicit. I did this for Carol, for me, for my little girl. And when my daughter got to the age that I was when my dad was doing it to me, that was another. That's why I kept pushing it from 2012, because I could see if somebody made my daughter do to them what my dad made me do to him, and I knew he was doing that to other people, that arrogance about him. The reason I share my story is because I don't want other people to go through what I've gone through, and I want people like the police not to turn around like they have done in this investigation into them and say we've got no lessons to learn. I want them to be held to account and lessons to be learned from it. You know, why aren't these children being protected or being believed? Because the independent inquiry, the outcome of it is that millions of children are being raped every year. The advice I would give anybody who has experienced what I've experienced is for them to go and speak the truth to the police, even if it takes you 35 years. Get therapy, go to your doctor, go to your GP, tell your school teacher, speak to your friends. Don't blame yourself if somebody, you know, tries to tell you that they love you and this is normal. Incest is not normal. It's a taboo subject, so it's very difficult for victims to know what's right or what's wrong. Hold your head up high. You've done nothing wrong. You've got nothing to be ashamed of, and know that you are loved, because God does love you. But you can follow me on Facebook and see how I fight for justice, and hopefully that will give you strength by following my example.
Justice has been served finally after 35 years.
An overwhelming moment for Carol Higgins. It's taken more than 3 decades, but now the man who sexually abused her and terrorised her family home is in prison.
Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it's helpful, and I hope it will give you encouragement to speak out and for you to get justice. And I hope that you will continue to live your life and don't let the abuse you suffer define who you are. Let the way that you heal define what makes you as a person. And I wish you all the best in the world. Good luck.